Welcome to WestEdge Wednesdays. These are the programs and presentations that took place live at the WestEdge Design Fair in November 2025, Barker Hangar, Santa Monica. This was the 10th edition of the WestEdge Design Fair. Incredible, incredible. So many great panel talks, conversations, experiences, things to really take in. The stage itself was presented by Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home, a Best Buy company and an incredible friend to the design and architecture community. The stage itself was designed by Kim Gordon of Kim Gordon Design. Friend of the show, personal friend. She did a remarkable job, just absolutely incredible what she did with this stage, creating an environment and an experience to take in these talks. And so you're going to see what she did, and I hope you enjoy it. This program that you're about to see is called Green Shoots. And the idea was, this is the one program that I moderated at the show this year. I wanted to sit with some very, very talented architects and talk about American innovation in contrast to architectural innovation that's taking place around the world from a material design standpoint at a time when, due to climate-induced crisis, we're having to adapt to some really extraordinary circumstances. And the folks who are going to determine that, how we respond, are designers, architects, product manufacturers, the people who create the products and who create the designs that are going to allow us to not just survive, but thrive in these environments. So you are in store for a remarkable conversation. And before we go there, if you are not currently subscribing, subscribe to Convo by Design, the podcast, so that you get all of these conversations automatically to your feed, and others as well that may be related, may not be related, but that you would probably still enjoy. At least, I hope you would. Anyway, enjoy this conversation. Hi.
Hi.
Awesome. How are we doing today? We good? Okay. So who's sat through a panel here at WestEdge already? Okay, so you know what I'm going to say. Brian, you just got here, I think. I'm doing a social experiment. I want to see if everyone can take their phones and put them in their pockets for an hour. No, I'm not looking at you saying I know you're not going to be on your, well, you might be on your phone. I might take a phone. Anyway, so listen, my name is Josh Cooperman. I host and publish Convo by Design, a podcast for the design and architecture industry. And thank you to Kim Gordon of Kim Gordon Designs for providing this environment for us today. It's incredible. And thank you to Pacific Sales Kitchen and Home, a Best Buy company, a friend of the show and a sponsor of this theater here at WestEdge for the second year in a row. And I'm gonna promote them for a minute because they support the design trade. And they just support the design trade in a number of ways, world-class trade program, but they make it happen. And I'm a testament to that because I've seen the designers, I've spoken with the designers they work with. So thank you to Pacific Sales for letting us do this. The talk we're gonna have today, it kind of changed in tone a little bit because you've all been on the show before, haven't you? No? No, 50%. I'm horrible. What am I doing? So I'm going to read the description I sent to these guys because you need to know the context. And it's funny, it's not funny. If you were in the Team Palisades talk that came just before this, it's real and it's serious. And if anyone has to wonder or ask the question about the importance of good architecture, there's your answer. Look to natural disasters. Look to what's happening. And we're going to get into some ideas about innovation. And here's what I sent to these guys. Architecture is entering a new phase of evolution through a resurgence of prefabrication, modular construction, and innovative materials, right? And my reason for wanting to have this conversation was because in 1983, I went through my first wildfire while living in Chatsworth. And no cell phones, no internet, when you smelled the smoke, you knew there's a problem, right? So I was on a horse with another in tow for 24 hours in board shorts and cowboy boots in October. And not knowing if you're going home or if your home is still going to be there when you get there is a horrible feeling. But it's interesting because what we're talking about here in Southern California with fires and earthquakes, wind and floods, they're not talking about where I live now in Oklahoma. They're talking about wind events, derechos, tornadoes, floods, fires, golf ball or tennis ball sized hail. Everyone's got their own issues. But what it comes down to is good architecture is your best defense. But I also said, and I'm going to start this off, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a minute. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, starting at the far end and going this way. But before I do, I'm going to throw a concept out there because I want to give you a little bit of time to think about it. I think that in the US in particular, innovation has taken a back seat. Product innovation, materiality, has taken a back seat to what is postable and what you can put on a reel and what you can talk about in the pages of a magazine, but not where you live. So we're going to get into that. But first, I want everyone to introduce themselves so that if you don't know them, you know what we're working with.
Check. Yeah, it's working. I'm Drew Davis. I'm partner at Cooperman Architecture and Design based in New York City. It's probably it's about 30 people in the office, and we do single-family residential work around the country and a little bit beyond.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here. I'm Brian Pinkett. I'm the principal at Landry Design Group. We do high-end custom homes all around the world, from 5,000 to over 200,000 square feet, and anything from very traditional to ultra-modern. And the one thing I've learned from my clients is they all love beautiful things, but they don't want to wait for it. So this is apropos. And when I'm not doing that, I'm at home at my Quaint Acres Animal Sanctuary, and we rescue animals, saving lives. And one thing I've learned from them, when I'm not chasing the goats and mending fences, is that innovation and sustainability is very important for us to move forward.
I don't have a farm. But yeah, my name is Aaron Neubert. I'm architect and principal of ANX with offices here in Los Angeles, and we have a satellite in Las Vegas. We've done a lot of houses in LA and in Southern California, and we're also doing a lot of hospitality work both here and in Las Vegas. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Joseph Dangaran. I'm one of the founding partners at Dangaran Architecture and Interiors here in Los Angeles. We're about 22 to 25 people at any given point in time, and we work on high-end single-family homes in about 8-9 states, mostly focused on the West Coast.
Okay, so these are the players. Here's the question, and I'm going to preface it with this. Brian and I have been friends for a very long time, and Brian has been on the show a number of times, and I asked him something once, and I have re-quoted him so many times, it should be my quote at this point. But I didn't go to architecture school. I asked Brian, what did you learn at architecture school? What did you learn through it? Did they teach you how to design? And he said, nobody could teach you how to design. They taught me how to think critically. Do you remember that conversation?
I do.
And I've been thinking about, that was years ago, and I've been thinking about that a lot because I feel, and this is the first question, I want your take on this. I feel we've given the NIMBYs, or as Leo Marmal said today, the fucking NIMBYs, we've given them too much power, and that power has counterbalanced the desire or willingness or will to be innovative as it relates to product and materials. And I will say this too, this is a conversation, not a Q&A. I do not have a list of questions. They have not seen a list of questions that I've sent them. So this is a conversation. So don't feel like you have to wait for me to call you. we're just going to throw this out. Who wants to go first?
I think your good friend Brian.
I don't even know what the question is.
I don't know, I have clients here, so I'm nervous how to answer this. I'll jump in. I've been, maybe it kind of relates to your question, but I think I was thinking about innovation, kind of when you sort of asked me to speak, and I think one of the things, so I've been practicing in LA 25 years now. There's definitely been an evolution of the sort of literacy of my clients from a visual perspective, and even materials and other aspects of the practice, where they want to be partners in the process in a way that is very different than it was initially. And what I mean, while I like that my clients are partners, they're bringing information that may or may not be vetted, about materials or about form or geometry or planning or whatever it might be, which is very different than early in the practice. So the idea that we are a licensed, accredited, educated professional sometimes is brought into question in ways that are interesting. So this idea that I guess what I'm getting at, it sometimes stunts innovation, right? Because you can't always bring information to your client with an open mind. There's a little bit of resistance because of something they've seen on Instagram or some other publication. And I think it's more good than bad, but it's challenging. I don't know if you guys experience that at all.
Yeah, I'll just, it just brought up a thought for me that, everyone has an iPhone, so now everybody's a photographer. So everybody has access to the internet, and so everybody's an architect. Unfortunately, the way the system is set up for doctors and lawyers, you have to use doctors and lawyers, but to design a home, anybody can do that. And so builders and developers, and excuse me if any of you are out there, you get to do that without architectural education, right? And so then when people see certain things that they gravitate towards, and it gets promoted and promoted, like the white homes and the black roofs and Brentwood, and that's what they want. But that's not really innovation, that's not really architecture, but it sells, so developers are doing it. And some architects are grabbing onto that to just make money. But if you're talking about innovation, then you have to allow for creativity, and sometimes that's painful.
I will say when I go to the doctor, I always bring my WebMD notes. So I'm guilty of it too, but I'm open to what they say afterwards.
I think for me, our clients are well-traveled, and they've stayed in the best boutique hotels around the world, and they're always on Instagram and, AD, and they kind of come to you with a set of ideas, but ultimately they do want a custom home that is, tailored to it around the way they live, right? So I think in some ways they're coming to us already for some kind of innovative approach to the way they live, right? So I don't know that I think they do have a capacity for innovation, but they might not, I think they don't want regret at the end. So I think it's our job to kind of guide them towards those innovations or any kind of new thing that's outside of the box for them.
Yeah, just because something is new doesn't mean it's better, right? I think it's good to challenge, and we have a handful of clients that are, from Silicon Valley that run very successful firms and have done so by quote unquote disrupting and challenging things. It's really tough to challenge the construction industry, whether it's supply, it's the labor, it's the education of that workforce. Sometimes it's good and it creates innovation and new things, and we've adapted our process and we've become better as a firm. But it definitely challenges people to question what's important and what can actually be done versus just changing for change's sake.
And let's extrapolate the clients who have big budgets and want everything from those who are in a fire-stricken area, who now have very limited resources from within which to work. to build their homes. And not just to build their homes, but you have this uninsurability factor now. The people who can build their homes now, will they have the money to do it again if it burns down? How do you talk to your clients? Because I want your take on this. I feel like the system is backwards. We ask our client, I'm not an architect, I'm pretending I'm you. You ask your clients, what's your budget? And I'm not saying that you do this, but that's the expectation on behalf of clients, like, what's your budget? I don't think that's the right question. I don't think it's a question. I think you should tell your clients what the budget is based on what they tell you that they want, but that's a harder conversation to have. Where do you start?
I think the question is, what are your goals? What are your goals? What are your expectations? And from our professional experience, are they aligned? And then you get into, okay, well, what's the schedule? What's the budget? How do you achieve your goals? Maybe the biggest home isn't the way to achieve your goal. It's a smaller home that is more cost effective, allows more integration with the landscape, is more insurable, et cetera. I think it's about goals. That's our first question, is what do you want out of your home?
Do you include programming in that conversation?
I think that's a huge part of it for us at least.
Do your clients all know that what they do in their homes are programmed, that their activities and their actions is programming? How does programming come up in conversation?
Yeah, I don't think they know it in those terms, right? They'll definitely come with. We more talk about scenarios. A lot of my clients have kids or have families or relatives that are living with them, so we sort of position it more. As situations that may occur, almost like it's a sitcom or something. If this situation happens, where will you retreat? How do you deal with that? Or if the kids are doing homework and you have some other agenda going on. So I think programming for us is sort of positioned in that way. But absolutely, like coming back to budget, a lot of times we're advocating for a smaller home that has more robust outdoor space, and in the end, most people are, at least in Southern California, are spending so much time outside anyways. And then we're definitely advocating for fewer decks. I don't know, I feel like, and some of my clients, I won't point them out, walked in, they want a lot of decks, and we're encouraging them not to have fewer, because decks are expensive, right? So, but I think scenarios are a way that we approach that, and people kind of relate to it.
I think in my experience, I have some clients come with a perfectly listed out program. Like, they know exactly what they want. This might be their second or third home or something, and they've been through this before. Others have no idea, and it just kind of comes out over time. Maybe it comes out on the site visit. You walk the site with them, and they say, oh, the sun is beautiful on this side of the site. I'd really love to have breakfast on this side of the site outdoors. And the program kind of evolves like that. And sometimes there's a back and forth between the budget and the program. I mean, you look at homes and what is it? Complexity, scale, program. Those are the things that really drive the budget. And sometimes there's a little back and forth.
For us, getting the program, that's the fun part. That's where we get to dream and imagine without a budget. Like, how do they want to live? How do they see their families growing up in their homes? How do they entertain? And just really, like, it's like you storyboard with them. It's kind of like what you were talking about, but really getting into the day-to-day and then the special events and everything that comes up for you as you live in your home. The budget will come up. It's usually never enough money. I mean, construction costs right now, as you guys all know, are through the roof. That's what we need to be working on. But everyone wants more than what they can afford, and it's our job to try to give them everything that they need or want at the value that's going to be right for them. So they're not spending too much money for things that don't matter, and they're also getting what they want. So it's a very tricky dynamic because you have to go kind of up and then down. You don't want to show them things that they can't afford, and then they have to pull it back because then they feel disappointed, right? But then if you don't show them enough, then they're like, well, where's the wow? I didn't want to see something pretty cool here. But then that costs more money. So it's a very interesting dynamic.
Okay, so let's flip the script on that for a minute. If we're looking to be innovative in ways to build and design, word association. I'm going to go this way. Prefabricated.
From my perspective, or like a client's perspective?
Yes.
Yes. From the client perspective, it's just questions and ultimately uncertainty and risk. I think people want to be comfortable with things, and you can do that through education, but I think ultimately they want to be comfortable with the decisions that they make, so risk.
I'd agree with that, but I would say maybe inflexible. I think, do you want an explanation of this term or move on? Yes.
Yes.
So the way we look at prefabrication is not an end product, but how can prefabrication support the designs that we do? Because everything we do is custom, but there are certain components that we can prefabricate in order to speed up the process, reduce costs, and it can be built off-site, brought in, installed. I built a house for myself in Malibu more than 15 years ago, and I thought I was on the cutting edge. I had prefabricated walls shipped in. The 6,000 square foot house was installed and built in a week, and I thought it was amazing. Now, today, it's unbelievable because there are companies that can take your plans, fabricate a 30, 40,000 square foot house, ship out all the panels, including steel. I mean, it's incredible how fast it can be done. And, you know, it's at a premium price, but what is it? Is it time or money? You know, they say time is money. Well, the new currency is trust, and time is luxury.
The question was word association prefabricated.
I've been thinking about this too. Well, you gave me the prompt about a month ago, but
I'll tell you the prompt that I gave you, and that was, and I had this conversation. There's a real world scenario, talking to friends, having a conversation, designer clients. What do you think of prefabricated? Comes up in the conversation. Ugh, right? That was the response. I don't know if that's a word or how to spell that, but it was ugh. It was like, and then we got to this conversation about travel, because travel is so inspirational. And we talked about Paris, and they went to Paris, and they took their pictures. The Eiffel Tower's behind them. They went up in the Eiffel Tower. Okay, the Eiffel Tower was prefabricated. The Eiffel Tower, what was it, 1890 for the World's Fair. It was built in 2 years, 18,000 pieces, 2.5 million rivets. It was intended to last 20 years, and then it was going to be disassembled, and it is so beloved. Could you imagine Parisians saying, yeah, we don't like it because it's prefabricated? Is it a knowledge, is it an education question?
I think so. There's a difference between modular construction and prefabricated homes.
I was going to get to modular next, but I figured this was the good entry into the idea, because, and maybe that's the question, are the two not interconnected in the minds of some people?
I think so. I think, you know, modular homes has there's some constraints in it when it comes to design. I mean, it has to be, you know, fabricated in a way it's kind of mass production. Everything's kind of on a module. It has some design limitations, whereas the houses we do have a lot of, you know, complex forms. However, when you look at prefabricated, you could design the house any way you want, and it can be built off-site. It can be built, you know, in panels, and it can be shipped to the site and built on site. So there's a little bit more more flexibility in prefabricated versus modular, in my mind.
Yeah, I think for me it's a matter of what problem are you trying to solve. So if it's we need to build, what is it? I don't know, 12,000 houses in the Palisades. Yeah, it would be effective if they're all the same, right? Or if they're effectively the same and they could be built in a factory and rolled out, then there's an economy of scale. But if we're building the Eiffel Tower, it's a one-off, so it's going to cost what it's going to cost, whether it's built on site or not. So I think the goal sort of needs to be baked in terms of answering that question in a way that's effective. So I said inflexible. A lot of value prefabrication is inflexible, right? There are certain rules and parameters. It has to fit in a truck. It has to be shipped. There are costs baked in. But if you're, we're doing a hotel in Arts District in Vegas. We're doing prefabrication on site. Not me, but my client owns the adjacent property. Very effective, but it's we're not building a home, right? A one-off project. So I'm sure your home wasn't free. Maybe it was more, cost economical than building on site, but probably not. But the quality is much better, right? So it's sort of, I think the goal is really important to understand what that question specifically.
I think we have to define or redefine some of these words because prefabrication and modular is usually synonymous with like lower income, lower
That's my point.
production.
That's my point.
But here's the thing, with technology that we have available to us right now, we're able to use it in the high-end spectrum. And that's where we have to change those words because they have different meanings. Okay, so if it's modular, does it mean that the quality isn't there, right? And that's what we're able to do now that we couldn't do before. And when we're talking about building a bunch of homes on for low-income housing, we call it modular housing, and they all look the same, cookie cutter. But there's a lot of streets in LA and many cities, that's how they were built. Sears homes, all over the place. But the reality is the technology we have right now is unbelievable, it's undeniable, and it's coming. And whatever you want to call it, modular or prefab, it's changing. The whole landscape is changing.
But for it to be quote unquote cost effective or economical, it needs to be mass produced. We need scale, right? We need scale. But yeah, I agree, the quality. Anyone who, I'm sure there are homes being built in your neighborhood, it's really not the most rational process, right? Or thoughtful and organized. But in a factory it is, right?
Right.
I mean, these are well-run situations.
Right, but if you look at the house itself as the community, there's a lot of scale within it. There's mass production within it. How many nails, how many roof sheet shingles, how many studs. If you look at it as that's the community, not the neighborhood as a community, then you can start to, question the words that we're using so that we can really take advantage of the technology. That's all I'm saying.
I think that's a great point, and it's so interesting. Architecture's a language.
Absolutely.
Right? But the vernacular doesn't seem to evolve. And how can you it's like, when does it become a dead language because technology has advanced so far beyond what the language of architecture has typically been? And I'll give you an example, just for, the Wallace Neff bubble house. The airform, you guys are laughing, the airform idea. It solves a problem. It was a horrible idea. It was a horrible design. Nobody wanted it. But it definitely would have solved a problem. And I guess I'm throwing this out there for conversation's sake. If you could build 10,000 airform homes in Altadena Pacific Palisades as an ADU, while their homes are being designed and built smartly and methodically because you've got the time, would that be a problem solver, or would that create more issues?
Not specific to Wallace Neff, but I'm thinking, it's seen as kind of comical in terms of the subjective nature of it. But an architect that comes to mind is Shigeru Ban, does incredible quote unquote disaster relief housing, and these are structures that outside of a disaster, I would personally love to live in one. They're just beautiful designs, but in order for it to solve that need that you just described, it needs to be cost-effective, temporary in its nature. If the end goal is a custom home that's ultimately going to replace that as temporary housing, I think the thought of 10,000 of these bubbles around LA, I think is great from a cost-effective standpoint, a construction timeline standpoint, but ultimately people want what they want, and as their housing, and they should. But there are pros and cons to all of this. There's always a hierarchy of decision making. Is shelter the goal? Is lifestyle the goal? And for most of our clients, it's lifestyle. We're helping them design a lifestyle, these scenarios, right? And so a lot of that, it's so personal. And I think we're doing 2 homes, one in the Palisades, one in PCH, and we probably, through January to June, my business partner and I probably talked to 200 plus people each. And we just wanted to field every phone call and talk to everyone. That ended up being untenable in the end because of, and rightly so, the trauma that is involved with rebuilding a home, where we've all heard these horrible stories of daughter here, son there, great-grandma there, parents over there, all lost their home. They're not interested in the design. They want what they had back. And so in order to make these really difficult decisions back to the shelter or lifestyle, they're going to choose lifestyle and memory over shelter, and that takes time and money.
Actually had maybe a similar but different experience related to some fire rebuilds in interviews we had. Years ago, we did 5 pre-approved plans for the city of Fresno. We were contracted by them to produce these, and I still have the copyright on those. So when we were meeting with community members after the fires, we offered the 5 plans, and it was fascinating. But I think it relates to this kind of lifestyle. Every person I met with, but one who we're working with, who took one of them for an ADU they're doing, wanted to make modifications. And so I thought it was really interesting. Like, in the end, as you said, I think people, they're very specific lifestyle or interests that were more important than just having a home. And so they, some were working with, someone went other directions. But kind of going back to the bubble house, I don't know if any of you know this project, but it's really interesting. My guess is none of you would want to live in it. I might, you guys might want to, maybe as like out in the desert as like a getaway. But I think in the end, and this goes back to my first comment about everyone is so design literate now. There are certain things that they just want, and if it doesn't meet that, their intuition or their intention is to go to custom or some form of modification to those plans.
It's funny you brought up the bubble house, because it was for sale, and someone who was looking to buy it called us and asked us if we would if we'd remodel it if they bought it. And then they also thought the same thing you did about, well, we can make these ADUs for everyone, to live in while their houses are getting built. So they're not user friendly. They're not remodel friendly. You can't just add a bigger kitchen or add another bedroom. It just becomes like a marshmallow mess when it's all done. And not a project for us to take on. I wished her well, but the concept in theory sounds good, but first of all, like you were saying, people want what they want, and we're so conditioned to live in these square spaces that it's not appealing.
People want what they want. No, I totally get it. But when you can't get what you want, you have to pivot.
Move to Florida. I'm just kidding.
Then you have the same issue. You know what's funny? So I moved from LA to Tulsa in 22. And where we are in Tulsa, there's a community called Lortondale. Google it. It's great. Not now, because I asked you to put your phones away. But do it at another time. So Lortondale is this mid-century modern community. It was a model community, tract homes, mid-century modern, one community, 2 community pools. It is exactly as it was when it was built in the 50s because 2 reasons. You're gonna laugh, or you should, because it's ridiculous, but it's Tulsa, and people are not rushing to Tulsa to buy up the land, so the dirt itself didn't overvalue the community value of the community, so it's still there. Here, we have a different story. But the reason why we're having this conversation in the first place is because it is untenable. You can't have what you want. Title 24, regulation, housing crisis, it's not just a shortage, it is a crisis. Just like in World War II, right? There aren't enough dwellings and there isn't enough land unless you change the strategy. And we're talking about innovation and we're throwing around words like prefabricated and modular and, Frank Lloyd Wright's Ready Cut Home. I'm sure that wasn't very adaptable either. I mean, not that he wasn't adaptable in his design, but I'm sure that you're not changing anything. But here's the question. Where does necessity is the mother of invention, right? That's the quote. Where are we now and where do we have to get before people realize, okay, you know what? I can't have what I want because the choice is either we adapt and do something different or we have to move to Florida.
Well, I don't know if people know what they want, and that's okay. I think that's part of our process in talking about scenarios or use case or goals is that what maybe a client, even in a very detail-oriented client and brief at the beginning of a project, if you take that over the course of a 4 to 6 month design timeline, what you end up with shouldn't necessarily be what we started with, because that means that there's no challenging of the scenario or the use case or the goals and no evolution. But back to, and maybe this is nostalgia, but back to your Tulsa reference, my wife and I, the first place that we lived together in Los Angeles is in the Village Green in Baldwin Hills, and that is it's a tremendous example of what you just shared. And property values continue to increase. Demand is high there. There's never a vacant unit. And these are 2-story, multifamily, essentially dwellings with some single family, but it's all centered around 60 acres of green space. And there's a built-in community there. And I guarantee you, if you polled everyone that lives there, something is missing from those units that they would have desired. But humans are also adaptable, and we find that it's extremely challenging when someone has lived on a property and then they come and hire us to build a new home, because it's really difficult to unlearn how they have learned to live in that space, because people are adaptable and humans adapt to their environments. But when forced to make a decision in 13,000 homes in the Palisades, they didn't choose to go through a design process. And when you put them on the spot, it's really hard to make a decision.
But in the absence, I totally get what you're saying. And I've heard conversations, the one that took place just before this, where people saying, I want what I had before. You can't have it. And I'm sorry that this happened. I'm sorry that this happened to you. But at the same time, I think the industry is better than that. I think I'm not an architect. I say we, like I have some stake in this, and I don't. I wish I did. I've told you this a million times. Like, I wish I had more talent, I'd become an architect. I would, if I had the skills to do it, I'd totally do it. But I don't, so I'm on the outside kind of looking in and saying, the Eames house, you look at some of these concepts and some of these ideas, and if you bring up words, you look at the Eames house, it's like, oh, that's amazing, that's iconic, but I wouldn't want to live in it. Right? But there have to be ideas that will make people excited about changing. And I think that comes with innovation, and it comes with new ideas and new vernacular and changing the way we think about it. And I'm going to start this way and go this way. What are you most excited about that's new, that you can use in new and different ways?
Well, I was thinking about, you said necessity is the mother of invention.
I didn't say it. Please don't quote me as saying that. I did not say that.
Earlier.
I did.
I do a lot of
didn't.
work on the East Coast, and we deal with like FEMA flood regulations, and so it's required houses to be raised to a certain level. But when you do traditional work, you're working in a historic district. How do you have a house that's elevated, that's made of stone and shingle with breakaway walls? I mean, you kind of have to figure out how to innovate, and it's forced us to do it. And in some ways, it's happened quickly because of that. And so I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that, but I think in some way the regulations will force this innovation.
That's what I was going to say. That if you really want to move the needle, we got to look at the regulations and the guidelines and the rules, and see what is pertinent and what isn't. Back in the old days, when people were building their own houses for their own families, were they falling down? No. Why? Because I don't want to kill my own family. I'm going to put an extra nail. I'm going to put an extra shingle. I'm going to do whatever it needs to make sure it's done. Now when I've got regulation and I can point the finger at somebody else and sue somebody for something that they didn't do right, then it's a whole nother ball game, right? So then everybody's cautious and tenuous and not sure what is it that we should do. And I think the regulations have gotten out of control. It's why we can't get the Palisades rebuilt. It's because there's too many people making too many decisions and nobody making any decisions at all because they're just politicking around. People are asking questions. There's no clarity. The answers are changing by the day. I mean, we've had to go in and talk to plan checkers about what constitutes a rebuild. Like, who wants to live in the exact same house that they were in when they have to pay for it? Let's make it a new, modern house with bigger windows and nicer spaces and higher ceilings and the things that people want today, not just rebuild a house that was built, back in the 1940s or 50s, right? So I think the regulations and the government agencies are really what's holding us up from really innovating.
Yeah, I mean, I would obviously the building code is restrictive and overly, and so I think from like material and other type of innovation, it's limited. I will say the zoning code is growing, it's evolving. So I would say probably some of the most exciting projects I have are ones where the client is interested in density on the property, whether it's an ADU that a relative is going to live in, or they're adding a second house, and I think that. There's maybe a more traditional kind of social dynamic that probably the Village Green had, right, where you have a community. In this case, it's sort of a micro community. So I think those projects are really interesting because then the scenario planning that we talked about earlier, it just adds more richness to that, and so I'm excited about those projects.
Yeah, I think the zoning code is huge, and again, looking at Altadena and Palisades, I personally think the best way to fire harden or to be preventative is increase your side yard setbacks, increase the distance between structures, not just with materiality and things like that, but no client, no homeowner that just went through what they went through wants to be told from the zoning jurisdiction or from the city that you can't have as big a home anymore because we know that the distance between structures is the best way to keep you safe in a future event. No one wants to hear that, and that would be a political nightmare for anyone that tried to do that, although science proves that. I think from an innovation standpoint in materiality, we're very curious about CLT, a lot of that technology, because it is fire resistant, it's heavy timber, low carbon or lower carbon in the overall process. And then at the Palisades, we're specifically interested in like a panelized, cold rolled steel construction, which is essentially tilt up that'll be brought on site and tilted up. So we're in a program there, which similar to licensing plans, we were actually working with Team Palisades on that. It's called the Reset program. It's really interesting, and our design happens to be increased side yard setbacks, a little bit taller home, a little bit longer home, but we're interested in that for sure.
Now we're talking.
There's one, the same factory, there's a builder, and they label it the Ghost Factory because you can actually bring, similar to you were saying in Vegas, you can actually bring a factory to an adjacent site, depending on the fire relief, and really start to build these panels. There's one currently in construction, not with us, I think Ken Unger, but they're doing the structural steel and steel trusses that are all built in a factory in Texas, shipped out and tilted up.
What is your thought on going down more basements? More homes in Southern California traditionally do not have basements. Thoughts on using a basement for a number of different solutions that includes, adding more density to a home, adding more usable space, adding more utility space, adding more spaces that you could do more with, undergrounding, which aids in undergrounding for the city, for the municipality. But then people will say, well, we have earthquakes.
It's more cost, and then exporting all the soil. I mean, LA has been up in arms about, homes, when we've worked on a few of them that, export 10,000 cubic yards of soil, which is a huge negative to the neighborhood. And so the NIMBY, once they have their house, they're going to complain about the haul route of their neighbor's house, and round we go. So I think in the Palisades, that would be a huge negative from all these trucks hauling soil out. It's a good way to get additional square footage, but you could also go back to zoning. You could argue the whole neighborhood could get together and say, we want to allow 3-story homes, or we want to allow 2 stories above, a half story, half below, half above, and be creative in that way. But that takes a community buy-in, and when a community, from a disaster standpoint, didn't choose to have that done, it's really tough to get consensus.
So is this a story of advocacy? Like, who's advocating for new ideas? It seems to, what I'm hearing is that the biggest barrier to innovation, the biggest barrier to getting new things done is a combination of overregulation and NIMBYism.
Or back to risk.
Or
back to risk. The idea that a client is going to take on the risk to promote innovation. That's a very, very specific client that has to be interested and curious in innovation. And they're out there, for sure.
It's almost like you really need industry, someone who has deep pockets to drive innovation.
Is that true, though? Because you've got a lot of these products and ideas that are used elsewhere, just not here.
Yeah, I think it goes down to, is your client going to take that risk? Is someone at the city going to take that risk? So, I think, unfortunately, in our late capitalist society, it's industry that's going to have to drive that, or it's, the Palisades residents getting together and, resisting to pay their taxes or something. There's something substantial would have to.
It's funny you bring up basements, but most of our projects do have basements, and we take advantage of that space. In the Palisades, we're doing 3 projects in the Palisades and 1 on PCH, which obviously doesn't have a basement, but the amount of land that needed to be scraped off from that is making basements really easy. We have a couple of clients that had swimming pools that don't want swimming pools, so that's making it easy. So as far as the basement thing goes, it's a brilliant way to get extra square footage without costing too much money, and I'll let the contractors talk about that, if it makes sense or not. But in terms of the innovation that you're talking about that other countries are doing that we're not doing, it goes back to regulations and the rules. Because there are things that other countries are doing that they're not letting us do here. There's things that other states are doing that we can't do in California because of the earthquakes, right? Or different, scenarios. In the fires, for example, it's nothing new. I mean, there've been fires for a long time, and we're not the only place that has fires. But why does it seem like it's a big shock and surprise when it happens? And I also go back to the rules and regulations about, like eaves and things like the little things that they make us do with events. But if we're going to have fire protection, that wouldn't be a smart thing to do. So, which way do we go? Do we create these events for attics to breathe, or do we, cut them off and we don't have overhanging eaves so we save from fire? And then back to your point about shorter or larger side yard setbacks, well, what's the number, right? If it was 5 feet, is it now 10 feet? If it was 30 feet, is it now 40 feet? Like, who determines what that is? How far does an ember fly? You know what I mean? There's like, how do you figure that out? I think is the real question. And is it preventative? Like, there's two ways to look at things. Do we look at it like, how do we stop doing something? Or how do we start doing something so that other things aren't able to happen, right? That's the question that I would have.
It just feels like we've reached a tipping point. And the last question I have for you is the question of advocacy, right? Who's pushing back on the rules and the regulations and saying, we need more? If you were here for the talk before this from Team Palisades, people are pissed. And if I'm someone who's making those decisions, I would not want those people calling me and demanding things of me, but it doesn't seem to change.
I think Aaron's point about it's money, it's taxes. And as an industry, there are obviously professional groups that push back and try to influence policy, but in the end, money gets things done. And I think that the taxes, it's a radical idea, but imagine if everyone that lost their home just decided not to pay taxes. They'd get people's attention.
That was my idea.
It is now.
It's your movement.
Hopefully there are no politicians here.
Yeah, right?
Okay, so listen. We got about 10 minutes left, and I thought what I would do is see if anybody has any questions. You do? All right. Murray, right?
So we're just talking about innovative things, and let me throw out an idea or a concept, just see if it goes anywhere. In the Palisades, being that many of the homes will be 2,500 to 6,000 square feet, has 3D printing been anything, and that approach been addressed or even looked into?
I don't know much about 3D printing a whole home and the regulations that would guide that, but it seems like, if you could afford it, because it's very expensive, the larger the printer, the more expensive it's going to be. I don't know if that's even a possibility. I know, but I don't know how much they cost. I mean, if it's going to cost more than...
It's got to be production. One of the team members on this reset program was... I'm spacing on the name of the company, was formerly at that company that's the concrete printing. And it's a great technology if you can replicate that exact same, right? It has to be able to, I think it can print, let's call it a 3,000 square foot home in like 2 weeks on a site. But it's got to go somewhere immediately after that. So it's got to go to the next site, or it's got to go across the street. It can't go from Palisades to Altadena back and forth. Otherwise, it's not cost effective. But there are options out there, but then there's a visual impact. There's a lifestyle impact back to the dome. You either have this 3D printed layer home, or you take that as a structural system and put plaster on top of it, which you can, but then it's not as cost effective. So it's that balancing of goals, lifestyle.
Yeah, I was on a panel a couple weeks ago with the 3D printed homes, and I kept 3-4 times asking the gentleman whose company was if it was less expensive. Finally, he answered no. It's definitely not less expensive. But I think, yeah, it's definitely a scale issue. If that factory is running all the time, then the cost comes down.
Okay, right over here.
Hi, thank you everybody. I'm a LEED accredited interior designer and green certified, and I was all excited to do sustainable projects, and I'm curious what your experience was. I have not had any requests. I've had one request for sustainable materials, and usually if I start talking, it's as if I'm speaking Russian, like they don't even know the language, what I'm talking about. Is that different in architecture? Or have you had any?
What was the question?
Sustainable materials, when you try to explain them, are your clients asking for them, or are they not interested?
Yes, I'll go. Okay. So yes, they want to talk about sustainability and regenerative and everything, and then when the dollar signs show up, then they reassess. Is it worth it? Is it right? There are certain things that we do that is sort of sustainable that everybody's doing. It's not new and inventive, but there are products that are coming out now that are better than some of the products that we had in the past. So that makes it harder, if you know what I mean. So for people to choose it, it's a better product, it's less expensive, I can get it quicker, you know, and I'm not quarrying out of a site in Italy, you know what I mean? So it's a tough balance between being sustainable, being cost effective, and what's going to work for the value for you and your family.
Hello. You guys have talked a lot about having clients that are asking for things that are maybe impossible, or you can't give them everything that they want. And and also you're dealing with a lot of clients that have gone through a significant trauma. Where do you draw the line between what you do as a trade and tapping into the emotional and mental ramifications that might fall more under like therapy? Where do you draw that boundary?
Did you go to
There
did you go to
is
school
no
for
line.
therapy?
There is no line. No, it's a great question. No, it's a great question. I think for me at least, the reason we still do residential work is because I like the interaction and getting to know people and kind of being, I don't know, sort of accessory to their lives in some way. But we'd worked on a few years ago on the Route 91 Harvest Festival. It was a mass shooting in Vegas. We worked on the memorial, and going into it, we made a commitment to ourselves that we were going to really, the design was going to come from the client, which are the families, right? And at the end, I was a wreck, so I didn't draw the line, but I think the fires are very similar. I mean, that level of trauma is the same, I would say. Obviously, people lost their lives, but they lost their lives too, right? But I think as designers, I would say you guys all probably agree. We do this kind of work because we like working with people. But yeah, there has to be some separation. I'm still working through that with my therapist, as you said. But
Right here.
So how is artificial intelligence affecting your practice or the industry? Because I saw, Google just released Nano Banana Pro, and people are putting their plans into that program, and then it's drafting things, and so I'm just curious.
Everybody's an architect. AI is here. It's not going anywhere, and if you're not using AI every day, start. Even if it's just talking to ChatGPT, anything. Because I've said it before and I'll say it again, there are going to be companies that are using AI and there are going to be companies that are out of business. That's it. That's the future.
We aren't using it too much to design yet, but we're starting to use it in small ways for emails or, as a time saver. And it gets you about 60% of the way there, right? 30%, whatever. But not so much for design yet, but what we have done, our first schematic designs are drawn by hand, and they're pencil drawings, they're pencil perspectives, and they don't get into a computer rendering until maybe you take it from that, then you have to build it, and it can be like a month before you get it into a rendering program. Now we can take all these old pencil drawings, these old hand-drawn perspectives, you plop it in, and you get a computer rendering in 2 minutes. It's kind of incredible. And if we can do that, it's not great, but it conveys some kind of idea about the design that's easily understood, and it kind of is a time saver in some ways. It can be dangerous now, but I think in a year it's kind of amazing.
I'd say the advantage of designing with AI is that it becomes a collaborator in your design process, whatever that is for you as an architect or a designer. And, it can come up with ideas that you might not have thought about to make the ideas that you already had even better. And that's how you would want to use it if you're going to use AI in design. The real benefit of AI is going to be in production. And that's not yet there. The design part, I believe, is there as a support, as a guide, as an aid. it's not going to design as good as you or, you know, these guys because they're talented, but it can bring up questions and it can show different ideas. Some of them are good, most of them are bad, but sometimes in the bad, you see some good, and then that can elevate the design that you already have.
Last one.
Last but not least, my name is Susan Moss. I'm an artist, and a lot of my collectors lost my art in both Pacific Palisades and Altadena. But if you'd like to, I do work with interior designers, and I do work with movie set designers. I'm going to have art in 2 movies soon. And you can contact me through susanhmoss.com if you need art. Thank you.
Was that a commercial?
So yeah, good for you. But just speaking of that, we're doing a project. It was just finished in Encino, of all places, and it's all digital art throughout the whole entire house, which is incredible. So if you have images of the art that was lost, you know, you could think about turning that into digital art for your clients and gifting it to them.
Nice job, Brian.
I'm always helping out.
Well done. You're a problem solver. You always have been. So listen, I think if anything, we didn't get to the bottom of anything. We probably, like a good philosophical conversation, we created more questions than answers, which I think if you're someone who has been affected recently or someone who has been affected ever or someone who wants what they want when they want it and they want to live a certain way, I just feel like, especially here in Southern California, we've gotten to the point where we have to change. We have to evolve. We have to be more innovative, which is why people go out and find themselves an architect and don't try to WebMD their next house. Fair?
Fair.
Thank you all for coming out today. Please, a little bit of love for these guys.